So why are we here? I think we've all familiar with storytelling. We've all been told that we need to use better storytelling with our data. But I'm going to take it a step further and talk about how data leaders can win decisions with powerful storytelling. So this isn't about necessarily about how do we would translate data into better looking graphs or tables, but it's about how do you take that message of your analysis of the work that you've done or your team has done and turn it into something more powerful. So who am I? Uh, I have 18 years of experience in data and analytics. I started my career in Australia, and then when I was 25, decided to return back to my homeland, which is Canada, and lasted about 10 years there before I decided let's try a new continent and ended up in Europe about 4 years ago. So right now I'm the VP of Data and Analytics at Zeal Network, based out of Hamburg, but I've got a ton of experience in different areas, whether it's e-commerce, fintech, prop tech. I spent a long time in wealth management and finance, and so that's the world that I've kind of come in. And for me, giving back is a huge part of what I enjoy doing, because I had a really transformative coaching experience early in my career, and I'd like to give back. So as you'll notice from me, I have this weird, horrible photos. If you look at any of my photos, they all have the same weird smile that my wife constantly picks on me for. So, and then finally, I'm also an IECL certified executive coach. So I do enjoy coaching and giving back in that fashion as well. So that's my background. And today, what we're going to focus on is kind of three things. I'm going to introduce to you the Storytell framework. I try to keep my frameworks somewhat catchy so that you remember them. So obviously we're talking storytelling. Why not have a Storytell framework? We'll go through a real life example so you can see what it would look like under the old way and how, if we use the Storytell fashion, how that'll apply. And then of course, nowadays we should be using AI as our coach, as our beneficiary, as our helper. And so we'll finish off a little bit with an example of a story coach and how I have some prompts ready to go. And you'll see how I use it to generate that Storytell framework. And so I want you to be able to use it. So we've all been here before in the past. We've spent all this time building our analysis. Everything's tight. We think we've got everything. Our graphs are looking great in our deck. And we go to present and no one knows what we talked about, right? We threw a bunch of numbers at them. We threw a bunch of graphs at them. People start talking about what their opinions are, what they've seen in the past. They start confusing prior analysis with this analysis. And at the end, nothing happens, right? They say, hey, we'll come back to you. Let's talk next week. Let's set up another chat. I mean, we've missed the mark. So we've all been there, right? I've had many, many meetings that way. And I think that's the part. What we want to do is want to prevent that from happening. And so I think what's really important is storytelling is framing. It's not fluff. It's about the fact that a good storyteller is inventing things. Our thing here is we want to share facts in a way that people are compelled to drive to action, right? So storytelling isn't about walking through all the charts that you did. It isn't about impressing with a ton of detail. It isn't talking about exactly the data and the numbers or sharing exactly what you did. It's really about framing what the problem is, what the insight that you found is, highlighting what is going to change if we make this decision happen, and talking about that impact, right? So we're changing the way that we approach it, trying to go from being less explaining to more influencing. Instead of informing people, we're trying to align, right? So we're just changing the narrative. It's the same story. It's the exact same analysis. We're just changing it in a way that's more compelling. And so here's what I've learned in my career. I'm still early in it, but everyday new learnings. Executives will forget 90% of what you talk about within minutes, especially around metrics, right? If you tell them about shift to conversion rate is X, odds are they won't remember it unless it really matters to them. And I've very rarely seen that. Stories frame a lot of what matters. So people will remember stories. People will walk out knowing, oh, wow, that was a really captivating story he told us, or a problem that he shared with us. They'll walk away remembering that. Our jobs as leaders or as data professionals is to make that meaning happen. So it's easy for us to go in and say, here's what I found. What do you want to do about it? But in reality, it's our job to take that next step, which is, this is what we found. This is what we recommend. This is what will happen if you do this. Now they can choose to say yes or no, but I've now used the exact same thing to create it a bit more compelling. And obviously that clear narrative is what influences, because at the end of the day, we cannot control what our customers or stakeholders do. We can only really influence and guide and provide insight. And then after that, it's ultimately their decision. If they want to change the feature on the product, spend marketing money differently, or just action the thing that you've told them, it's their decision in most companies. Right. So the thing that I've learned the most is if you don't tell that story, someone else will, and they will create their own story, and then it will probably be wrong. So why not be the one that shares that story? There's always a story. So here's where most updates start, right? We're accurate. We're quite detailed. We give the numbers, look at the CAC for TikTok, look at this Instagram, look our conversion rate is higher on Instagram. And we share a message. And that message has that information in it. Why? Because we're attracted to numbers. There's a reason we're in data, right? We love numbers. We love to find these insights and we want to share them. And so my message would be over a 6-week campaign, TikTok ads delivered a 20% lower CAC and a 30% higher CTR than Instagram, right? And so, hey, what should we do about this? And then you got the executive on the other side going, what the, I don't know. Like, that's a lot of numbers. Like, what? Right? You didn't give a recommendation. You didn't kind of explain what you would like to do. So obviously there's something in here. There's something that you found. There's an insight that you found. No one's questioning your numbers, but what is it that is? And the reason that is most of us were taught how to explain analysis wrong, in my opinion. But we always were told to start with the method. When you go back to primary school or even high school, tell us how you solved this problem. Write down the work that you did to get to your answer. Okay, so you write down the work that you did. So then when you get to business and you get into your professional career, you are then start to explain how you did it. All right, you explain how you built it, what data was used, what joins you did, how you know it's accurate. Then you get into showing the findings. Then you show a ton of graphs, a ton of tables, a bunch of metrics. And then we looked at this, and then we looked at that. And then you'll add way too many charts just because there's all this interesting stuff that I need to share with you. I did 12 weeks, I did 6 weeks of work on this. I want to show you the 12 slides because that's how you know that I didn't waste my time doing this. And then at the end, we always end with a bit of a caveat. Yeah, but potentially we got to be aware the data quality is not great, or the model was only trained on 6 months of data, whatever it happens to be. And at the end, of course, stakeholders will nod. They'll be nice, most of them anyways. They'll ask for a follow-up or they'll just walk away and nothing will happen. And so I think that's the part. This is the way that we were taught. And unfortunately, that might work early in your career, especially as you're trying to prove yourself to your own boss, who is a data leader. But when you get into the space where you're now presenting to people that are not in data or not in your space, then that methodology falls flat. Right? You get a lot of awkward silences. And that's been me. And I'm sure it's been you. And I'm sure it's been all of us more than once. So we want to change it. So we go from explaining data to inspiring a decision. The goal is we want to get a decision out of this. We want to get some action at the end. And so if I just skip the left side, because we've talked about that a little bit in the last little bit, the right side is where we're going to focus on today. We want to start with what's at stake. Right? There's no better way to get someone to listen than say, you will die in the next 6 months. Well, what do you mean I'm going to die in the next 6 months? If you don't stop eating ice cream every night, right? But if you start off with ice cream is bad for you and the likelihood of you dying in the next 6 months is 72%, not really capturing attention, right? So again, I'm using a very generic, bold example, but we can think about them. So start with what's at stake. Frame the insights around the risk or the opportunity. People like to talk dollars, risk. They like to talk about revenue, client acquisition, whatever that metric is that they care about. Frame it around what they care about, that opportunity. Highlight the business relevance. So what does it mean to the business, right? If we do that, we will end up with 35% more new clients that join us. That means extra millions in revenue. End with a clear recommendation. So as you'll see in a second, and then finally make them leave thinking we need to act. Now it's not about being, what's the word I'm looking for? This prophet that goes out and just says things to get a reaction. It is obviously to be in a way that is methodical and still shows up as very mature in your approach. But if you use this framework, the goal is to get them to act in some possibility. So let's look at the storytell framework. First, and we're going to go through each of these letters, but I start off with the situation. Like I said, start off with what's the reality right now? What is the problem that we have? What's the tension we talked about? What's that tension that we're trying to solve for? That conflict that creates that urgency? What's our opportunity if we don't solve, or if we do solve that tension? Or what's the risk if we don't solve that tension? What's your recommendation? And then quantify it at the end. That's yield. What's at stake? What do we have to gain? Right? Again, bringing it back to saying that. The tell part at the end is actually where the magic happens. So the story is a framework. The tell part is less specific about what it is. It's tailoring the emotion and the logic and the language to that audience. And we'll go through that in a second. So every great data follows an arc. So every story follows an arc. It starts with a truth and ends with a decision. All right. So it's a quote that I made up. So it's not me, but we should start to share it more. So let's revisit our analysis from a couple minutes ago. So remember that table that we had earlier. This is the message that we kind of wrote. Great message to a data team, great message to someone who is also as analytical as you, but when it goes to the business, for most people, not everybody, but most people, this goes over the top of their head and you've lost them in the room. So we need to build that storyline. So using that example of TikTok versus Instagram, let's start with the situation. So we know TikTok outperformed Instagram on cost and clicks during a 6-week test. We have this information, right? It's all here. The tension is that we risk missing a high-performing channel because we're down in the trend. So that's the tension that we need to solve. So that could be something like we're missing an opportunity of 1.2 million, or say at the bottom, 250 quarterly. The opportunity, if we shift 10% of our spend to TikTok, that could yield 8,000 new customers in the next quarter. I recommend that we run a 4-week regional pilot that we can reallocate 10% of the budget to show that increase. Low risk, quick, easy, yes. Not much of a change if you're wrong. And that's going to give us $250,000 quarterly in savings if everything happens. I think we can get a portion of that in our 4-week pilot test. So we've created a situation, a tension. We've talked about what the opportunity is, the recommendation, and then what the yield will be at the end. So we tie it back to something that matters to them. When we get into the tell now, this is where tailoring your message matters. So we had that Instagram and TikTok problem. If I'm talking to my data team, I'm going to use the click-through rate, the cost of acquisition, the conversion rate. I'm going to talk about numbers. I might talk about data accuracy. I might talk about model performance. Right? I might talk about what our next step is to get a little bit more information. So that's that one on the right. We're familiar with that. We live that day in, day out. It's the same exact analysis. It's just slightly different. We're focusing on reliability. We're focusing on our caveats. We're focusing on our technical rigor of our model. That's what we're used to. But then I go and talk to my peers. Now, maybe you're a manager, a team lead, and you're talking to another team lead of a completely different department. They don't understand data. Let's just say marketing or product. In that case, it needs to be much more tailored to them. So here, for example, let's talk about a product marketing peer. Hey, TikTok ads attract more engaged users based on these numbers, but we have a slower conversion. If they want to see the numbers, we can provide them, but here you go. Let's align with creative and run an A/B test in one region next sprint, right? And here's what that would mean. Again, you would use the same framework, but I'm just talking about the level of granularity. Here I'm talking about let's do this, and this is what it'll give us. Action, collaboration, customer-driven impact. Right? The things that matter to them, they're how they want to be. And then if I take it a step further up the list and I go, okay, executives. Executives now have even less of an understanding. They don't really care if you want to run an A/B test, but they depends again on the audience. So here we're just talking about TikTok isn't just doing this, it's acquiring cheaper customers. If we just reallocate a small budget, we can get this much. And this is what I recommend doing. I can align with product and marketing on this. I just need you to make a decision that you're interested in doing this. Same message, right? We same problem, same analysis, same everything, completely different ultimate message because we're tailoring it to the audience. And we can even take a step further and tailor it to the individual. So if my CEO is a very much a person who really cares about customer acquisition because they believe that that's how it's going to work, I'm going to talk a lot about we would get 8,000 new customers. If my CEO or my CMO is more about how do we increase our revenue as a percentage of our marketing spend, then I would use that metric because that's what matters to them. And I'm able to tailor my message, the decision that we want to spend more money on TikTok, to how it impacts them and how they're going to drive that decision or that action or that collaboration. Right. So again, same analysis, just different message to that audience. And so now we've gone from a message that on the left, the analysts speak, which was very much more numbers driven, to something that still has that fact in there with a bit more. So now we're saying, hey, it's cheaper on TikTok. Let's reallocate budget. Let's make some money. Let's do this locally before Q4. Right? We've just changed our story. Now, obviously, you can pad the story. I didn't want to create a ton of text, but you can pad the story to give a bit more context. But ultimately, we're still following that same model of that tension or that storytelling, right? The situation, the tension, the opportunity, the recommendation, and then finally the yield, right? And all of those pieces in there. Okay, so you've got the framework now and you're like, okay, that's still, I got to figure out how to use this. So ChatGPT is a great story coach. And I use it very much. And I'll show you an example of exactly how I've used it for this exact analysis that we've talked about. So you can use ChatGPT very much to summarize this analysis very quickly for you. So especially if you've got too much detail, we want our teams to document their findings in the way that they're comfortable, but we then need to translate those findings into some sort of action with the business. And so a lot of the time, summarize this in a business-focused line or business-focused view for an executive who cares about ROI and risk. The tell piece at the end. You can reframe the message, right? Reframe this insight as a business opportunity, because we don't always necessarily understand which the business opportunity or what might be the tension. So it helps us. And then finally, can you rewrite this message for those three audiences, that tell piece, the executive, the peer, my data team. And if you watch my first lightning session, I talk a lot about knowing your audience and using ChatGPT as well as a way to help you reframe or use it to tailor a message to, say, your CEO, who might be one person, versus your CMO versus your data product leader, your product leader versus your marketing leader. They all have different ways that they would like to be communicated with. And so you can use that to tailor that message to them. And so let's look at this example. So apologies, it's about a 2-minute example. So here is a big data set. It's about 100 rows. It has all the information that we had about TikTok and Instagram. This is, again, a made up example, but this is the data that we use to form our analysis with, right? So we've got the spend, the clicks, the conversion, et cetera. This is the report that we wrote. So my team, or our team, spent 6 weeks working on this and looking at all this. They spent a lot of time. They obviously had a methodology. They probably had a hypothesis they wanted to test. They looked at some stuff. They obviously come up with some key findings that are quite detailed, and especially, some graphs that we want to use. But if we just forward this on, we're going to get stuck as, you're too in the weeds, or I didn't understand it. It was too long of a report. I mean, I know this is only 2 pages, but a lot of the times they're closer to 5 to 10, depending on the team that you work with. And I didn't read it. Right? It wasn't clear. I don't have the time to read it. So now I upload these into ChatGPT, and we start to look at and say, here's that, and use the Storytell framework to help me. So it'll look at the data, obviously. It's familiar with the Storytell framework because I've taught it the Storytell framework. I've given it essentially what it is and what I expect from it using the slides you have. And so here it knows kind of what it is. And it now starts to say, okay, can you give me some more context? And so here, what I'll do now is I will actually give it some context around the problem that we have. So again, I need to actually teach it and help it, but why and what were we doing? So here's what we were doing. Here's the audience that I'm trying to tailor to, specifically the CMO. Again, you ignore the video part. And here's the tone. I would like an executive, confident, story-driven piece, right? So it will then help me create that. Again, the beautiful thing here about this is just to help us start the conversation. The goal is that I would never copy and paste this, but I would look at this and say, okay, what is this meeting kind of the story that I'm trying to tell? Is this making it a little bit clear? Am I hitting my situation, my task, or my tension, not task, but my tension, my observation the right way? And then here, right? So now the Storytell framework here has changed. It's not great, but it's all good. And here from now, once I've got this now, I can say, yes, give me a script that I might use. give me a script that I might use to do this editing, but give me a script that I might use to speak at a meeting, right? So now I have a script that it'll give me a script and it helped me explain. Again, this is very much practicing, bouncing the ideas, thinking about how I want to do this, looking at how I communicate this. You can see here, I'm giving a little bit of context. I'm giving the nuance, the takeaway. I'm giving a recommendation. I'm walking it out that way. And then once I have this, you can then also, if you want, start to look at some of the talking points. And so it can then start to give you a one-page summary that you can also share in advance if you'd like, with some numbers. Again, it is there to really help you think about the different trade-offs, maybe some experiments, maybe some recommendation. So again, it's there as a tool, as a partner, to kind of work your way through that. And so this is how I use it. And mostly then it just allows me to spar with somebody that isn't my team because they're not thinking that way. And it's not necessarily my boss, because then I also want to make sure that I'm appearing to be able and capable of doing this. And so I'm able to then start with this framework and then come forward with a good story that aligns to the Storytell framework and apply it that way. Yeah. And so that's pretty much the lesson for today. It's a very quick lightning session. I know we had an hour booked, but going through it very quickly. So one of the things that I always encourage people to do is apply this, because we learned something today on this 30-minute call. At the end of it, you forget about it by tomorrow or the next week if you don't apply it into something. So my only recommendation or advice is pick something, an analysis that you've either done recently or are about to do, and maybe reframe it using that Storytell framework. And so again, situation, tension, opportunity, action, and yield. And then from there, tailor that to the audience you're talking to. So you might already have all these, but tailor it to your boss, tailor it to your team, tailor it to the chief marketing officer, if that's who you're presenting it to. And then potentially, if you want to share and seek feedback, obviously post in the discussion space. I'm more than happy to write feedback, or you can send it directly to me, and I'm happy to work with you over the next week or so to kind of refine it and see if there's anything down that path. And so with that, I will wrap up and open it up the floor to questions if there's any questions. But this is part of, or one small part of, the course that I run on Maven called From Data Manager to AI Ready Leader. And so our next cohort actually is November 17th, 18th, and 20th. I need to change these dates. They just changed today, and the 25th. We just finished our first cohort and we had over 16 people come. Great participation and a great opportunity to work together. So I spend about 4 modules per 2-hour session. We go through in detail what it means, how to apply it, and then we break out into small groups and work together to learn from each other, practice what we've learned, share our findings and our learnings, and then we kind of come back together as a group after and work it out. So over the course of 3 times 2-hour sessions and then 1 FAQ on the 25th, you'll walk out with a fully functioning operating system that lets you communicate to different audiences, that lets you be ready for change, especially the change in AI. And then obviously then create this operating system that gives you that freedom or that free time to think strategically, to take that next step in your career, maybe something that's been blocking you. So because you've joined today, there's a discount code. You can scan the QR code. If it doesn't work, you can also go to Maven, look up the From Data Manager to AI Ready, and use the code at checkout, the MLS 220, and you'll save 20%. So the price will go from $250 to $200 for the upcoming course. Finally, that cohort will be the last one at that price point. We are going up because it's our second one. We're testing the material. We're really learning as we go and iterating, but the feedback on the first cohort, 4.8 out of 5. So hopefully you'll join.